Good evening, welcome everybody here in the Bali and everybody watching from home. This afternoon we will speak about the 47th genocide on the Yezidi. My name is Yante Mosselman. I am a program editor here at the Bali, and I'm very happy, happy is maybe not the right word, but I'm very grateful to be here today. This program is a collaboration between the Bali and Khalid Barkat, Sipan Salim, and Amjad Al-Karaf. And I want to thank them before we start with the faith they put in us, because for them, of course, this is a subject that is a lot more personal than for me. So I'm very grateful for the trust they put in us with the Bali to organize this program together. So today we are here to talk about what happened to the Yezidi in 2014, but also in 2007 and before that. On August 2007, Iraq's heaviest attack took place in two Yezidi villages, Til Ezer and Siba Sheikh Khidir in Sinjar. The suicide bombings killed 796 Yezidi women, men and children, and injured more than 1,500. 7 years later, on August 3, 2014, a date you probably all know, the 74th genocide against the Yezidis took place in Sinjar. 12 days later, on August 15, almost all of Kocho and Hardan's men and adolescent boys were killed by ISIS. Women and children were kidnapped and trafficked. And this is 7 years ago today. And this afternoon we will reflect on these events that took place in 2007 and 2014, but also on what is still happening now on a daily basis to the Yezidis. And lastly, we will talk about the importance of recognizing the genocide here in the Netherlands, something that happened not too long ago. Before we start talking with each other, we've invited Brenda Stoter Boscolo, who will read a passage from her book, The Forgotten People. It's this book, and if you haven't yet, I recommend very much that you read it. And after that, we will join in conversation with Saeed, Qasim, Sulaiman, Peshmerge Morad, Jan Yilan Kazelkan, and Anne Kuik. With that, Peshmerge Morad will play on his duduk, a traditional Armenian instrument. And of course, I will introduce everyone more properly to you later on. It's also on behalf of Khalid Barkat, Sipan Salim, and Amjad Al-Karaf that I want to say that it's very important for us to show what has and is happening to the Yezidi community. And with events like this, with programs like this, we like to think that we maybe put a little bit of in the greater scheme of things so that what happened will not be forgotten. So before we start, there's also one other thing that I have to say. You're very welcome to join in conversation at the end of this program with a question or a remark. But before you do that, because we stream this program live, please make sure that I am running towards you on that stairs on my heels with a microphone. So it might take a little while. I think this is the time where I invite Brenda Stoter Boscolo to join us on stage, and I will introduce her to you. Brenda Stoter Boscolo is a Dutch journalist who writes about the Middle East. Her articles have been published by, amongst others, al-Jazirah, De Telegraaf, Trouw, Algemeen Dagblad, De Tijd, and De Groene Amsterdammer. And from 2010, she traveled through the Middle East. Her book, The Forgotten People, The Story of the Yezidis About the Last Genocide, that's this book, and she wrote. And she spoke with hundreds of Yezidis about their culture, their past, and the genocide by ISIS. Brenda.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really an honor to stand here in front of you on a day we remember the victims of Kocho. When I was asked to prepare a story for this event, I was very much in doubt, because where should I start? I spoke with dozens of women who have been enslaved, with boys who had been trained in boot camps, and with men who had lost their entire family in the blink of an eye. I heard how ISIS has sold the youngest children to adoptive parents or as servants. Islamic State had stopped at nothing in their attempt to wipe out the Yazidi community, and the genocide encompassed far more than the sexual slavery, which the media often highlighted. I would like to tell you about every person I have met. About Jian, a girl who was kidnapped for years and who never gave up hope to be reunited with her missing father. About Ismail, whose brothers and parents were murdered, whose sisters were kidnapped, and whose youngest brothers were forced to carry out a suicide mission. I also would like to tell you about Khudeda, who once had a beautiful family and a successful business, but now lives all alone in a refugee camp because ISIS took everything from him. Yes, I would like to speak about all of them, because they all represent the face of genocide, because the world needs to know what ISIS did to the Yezidis, because their stories matter. Those I interviewed were acquaintances who later became friends, and I visited them as often as I could. They were my eyes and ears, telling me about their life and the past, and I wrote it all down, often frustrated or in tears, but sometimes with a smile. I wish you would get to know all of them, but I must make a choice. So today, I will tell you something about Majdal, an ordinary Yazidi boy from Kocho who became a child soldier. To you, he may be one of the faces of genocide, but when I look at him, I see a family member, a little brother. The last time we met in Ganke camp, I asked for his permission to use this photo for my book cover. Majdal said he thought it was an honor and repeated that I was allowed to use the photo. But he did wonder why I had chosen an old photo. Wouldn't it be better to take a new one, since he had grown quite a bit in recent years and his hair was different too? I told him that the old picture was fine. Majdal nodded, and with a mixture of old memories and determination in his eyes, he handed the photo back to me. And then he said something that people have been telling me year in, year out, in every tent, in every camp. Tell the world what happened to us. So I will, till I'm old and gray, for Majdal and for all the Yezidis. It's called My Friends Are in Heaven Now. Look, that's me when I was with Daesh, Majdal says, showing me an Islamic State propaganda video on YouTube. In a stifling refugee tent in Ganke, the harsh sound of a jihadist nasheed drowns out the hum of the air conditioner. His cell phone displays images of a training camp for boys in the caliphate. There's Majdal, wearing a khaki camouflage with an ISIS headband around his black hair. His face looks younger. It's really strange to see myself like that, he says softly. Today, Majdal is wearing sneakers and a t-shirt, and he has a trendy haircut. At first, he seems like an ordinary 14-year-old, but he hasn't felt that way for a long time. Everything to do with his childhood was destroyed when ISIS attacked his village, Kocho, on August 15, 2014. Majdal was separated from his mother and sisters and taken to Raqqa. He was just 11 when he was sent to an ISIS military training camp. Then the first words the ISIS leader said to him were, "Forget your religion, forget your family, and forget your past. As of today, your name is Abu Uthman, and you're a Muslim." We're in the tent where Majdal lives with his brother. It's made of wood, tent canvas, and cement. This appears to be Majdal's first interview, and because he's underage and has been through a trying time, I proceed with caution. Before our talk, I ask permission from his brother, after which I also ask Majdal for his consent. I reassure him that he can tell us anything, but he doesn't have to tell us anything he doesn't want to. He says people have to know what ISIS did to boys like him. That's why Majdal agrees to go ahead with the interview. My interpreter Farhad translates. It must be difficult for you, I begin. But can you tell me more about the time you spent as a captive of ISIS? Majdal nods. You can't imagine what life was like there. No one can. Everything revolved around violence, from the best way to commit murder to how to make a bomb. He stares at the wall, not meeting my eye. His dark eyes seem to look straight through it, into the distance. I'm here today to interview Yazidi boys who were trained by ISIS to become child soldiers. Yazidi boys between the ages of 7 and 15 were separated from the women and sent to what are known as cups of the caliphate camps. In the camps, the boys were continually bombarded with jihadistic propaganda. They were subjected to military training and were forced to take up arms for the terrorist group. Every day we had to be in bed by 10. We got up 6 hours later and they kept us busy around the clock, Majdal explains. Between the hours of 4 and 5 a.m., the boys had to perform Islamic morning prayers. Intensive military training came next, lasting for several hours, followed by theory lessons about the life of Prophet Muhammad, the Quran as in Islamic military law. The classes went on until late at night. We had no time to memorize the passages, but Daesh didn't care. If they found out we hadn't been studying, they bound our hands and feet and beat us with electrical cables. At night in the dorm, Majdal could hear the other Yezidi boys crying for their mothers. "Don't cry," he'd say, trying to comfort them. "If they find out you miss your family, they will make life miserable for you. Just act like you're one of them, and someday you will be free." That ended up being his survival strategy as well. During the final phase of the boot camp, he'd been dreading the day when he would graduate with other Yezidi boys. His unit was sent to the outskirts of the Syrian city of Aleppo to fight the Free Syrian Army. At first, Majdal and a few other Yezidi child soldiers from his unit refused. "It's either fight or starve," the jihadists threatened, and their meals were laced with drugs. "After eating, I felt like a hero. If they would ask me to set myself on fire, I would have done it without any hesitation," Majdal said. One particular event is etched in his memory, the moment when Qasim, a 16-year-old Yezidi boy, was killed. "We saw the enemy in the distance, and before any shots were fired, Qasim rushed at them and started shooting. Just as suddenly, he sat down, calm as you please, in the open field. That's when the FSA fighters shot him dead." No one can say for sure if Qasim was planning to give himself up or if it was a suicide attempt. For the first time during our talk, Majdal gets tears in his eyes. To distract himself, he takes out his cell phone and opens his Facebook page. "My friends are in heaven now," Majdal said, while scrolling to his timeline. During his captivity, Majdal did what he could to avoid combat. One day he pretended to be sick, hoping he wouldn't be sent to the front. The leader grabbed a large club and hit his left arm. "They took me to the hospital and my arm was broken and I was still a prisoner, but at least I didn't have to fight." Because Majdal was temporarily unfit for battle, he was assigned work in a gun store, which was also a secret arms depot. Similar storage facilities were a prime target for airstrikes by the Syrian government as well as the international coalition. It was a dangerous place, but the chance of survival was still better than on the front line. In addition, his new job offered more opportunities for escape. He worked in the gun store with a boy named Abu Khattab, the 12-year-old son of a prominent Lebanese ISIS commander. Majdal tried to befriend him in the hopes of gaining some extra privileges. His plan worked, and the two became close while repairing weapons and cleaning the shop. Abu Khattab even put in a good word for him, so he was sometimes allowed without supervision. Later, Majdal would take advantage of that freedom to call his brother in Iraqi Kurdistan using a cell phone one of the fighters had left behind. Then, Majdal's family devised a secret plan to smuggle him out of the caliphate. Majdal escaped, but he still doesn't feel very free. He's worried about the fact that his community has been living in tents for years now, hardly receiving any assistance. Majdal never thought that life after liberation would be like this. He has not been offered any psychological help and isn't allowed to go to school because there are no provisions for children who've missed so many years of education. "To be honest, I don't think about the future. I just need rest," he says slowly. He has bags under his eyes from exhaustion. "Do you know what happened to other Yezidi boys who fought alongside you?" I ask. Majdal shakes his head. "They must be dead by now." He can't be sure, but he suspects that 90% of the boys from his frontline unit were killed. "Why did ISIS send you in first when that was so obviously futile?" I ask. "As cannon fodder to clear a path for the adult fighters, so we would die first," he says sadly. I swallow, and Bati too seems lost for words. So much cruelty, I mutter. I pretend I'm busy taking notes, but my eyes well up so much I can hardly see. The tears leave rings on my fake notes. I rip the sheet of paper from my notebook and crumble it up. A journalist who starts to cry is of no use to anyone, especially a teenager who was imprisoned by ISIS. When we first met, Majdo had the look of an old man in his eyes. Haunted by nightmares, he woke up every night, covered in sweat and confused. When he talked about his captivity, he tried to hide his feelings. Sometimes it worked, most of the time it didn't. And then a tear slipped down his cheek. One day my friend Ismail, whose brothers experienced the same thing during their captivity, was also present. I know your pain. It's okay to cry, he told Majdo. They hugged like brothers. And then I realized that the Yezidis had discovered the best way of healing, mourning together as a community. I saw Majdo at his best, at his worst, and everything in between. At the age of 15, he shyly told me that he had a girlfriend. At the age of 16, he worked in the fields to earn some extra money. The last time we met, we sat at a mountain near the displacement camp. Majdo suddenly pulled out a pack of thin, minty cigarettes from his pocket. "Do you want one?" he offered me with a big smile. I took one for the occasion, but not after I lectured him, well, actually the both of us, on the dangers of smoking. That's what big sisters do. From a traumatized boy, he became a confident, bright, and kind-hearted young man. The nightmares disappeared, the trauma lessened, but his worries remain. Majdo worries about everything: not going to school, living in a camp, his family in Germany, the future of the Yezidi community. But most of all, he thinks about his missing sister. She has been in captivity since 2014. Majdo never expected to see her again, but Taus Melek works in mysterious ways. On the day before August 3rd, his relative in Germany sent me a video. Majdo was crying, but this time they were tears of joy, because after 7 years of captivity, his sister was finally home. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brenda Stoter Boscolo. I would like to ask Saeed, Qasim, Sulaiman, and Peshmerge Morad to join me here on stage while I'll introduce you. Saeed Qasim Sulaiman is a Yezidi activist and executive director of the Farida Global Organization in Germany. And he has worked with many Yezidi survivors, such as Nobel Peace Prize winner Nadia Murad and Farida Khalaf, and spoke to many survivors, leaders, and governments. Welcome, thank you very much for coming. Peshmerge Morad, you are a human rights activist, musician, and a master's student of data science at the University of Twente. Both of you traveled here all the way from Germany. Thank you very much for coming and being here today. Saeed, what we're going to try to do in this half an hour that we have is to go a bit more into the prosecution of the Yezidis that has not started since the genocide in 2014 or in 2007 even. And with that, I also want to talk with you about the current situation. Saeed, is it okay if I say Saeed? Yes. Only? Okay, thank you. I wanted to start with you and ask you, who are the Yezidis?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I would like to thank Dibali and also Yezidi activist Khaled, Sipan, and Amjad for organizing this very important event commemorating the 7th year of Yezidi genocide. This question has been always repeated. Mm-hmm. And there is a reason behind, because during the history, Yezidis were always introduced to the world with false information. And that's why always we take most of the time explaining who we are. The people who refuse to refuse devil's name, they are recognized as devil worshippers. I would like to start by this. Maybe if my grandmother was watching me, she would be angry, because saying devil in Yazidi culture, it's not allowed. It's not allowed not because we respect and follow him, no. It's not allowed because in Yazidism, when you say a name, you recognize and acknowledge him. We don't say devil because Yazidis don't acknowledge a second power similar to God's power. And completely the opposite has happened. During the history, Yezidis has been defined as devil worshippers. And this is not the first genocide. And this is one of the main reasons behind. The people who refuse to say a name, they are introduced to be devil worshippers. Ladies and gentlemen, Yezidis are not just a new name you have heard. They have been facing genocide since the Ottoman Empire and even before that. There are many genocidal campaigns with similar ideology to ISIS. An ethnic religion minority who estimated about 500,000 to 1 million, originally from Mesopotamia region, until today it's facing an ongoing genocide. I myself am not a religion expert, neither in Yazidi religion or in religion in general. There is one thing that I would like to share with you about Yazidis, that I am proud of to call myself Yazidi, although I'm not a religion, I would say, a religion leader and expert. When we pray, my mother and my grandfather and mother teach me how to pray for other human beings, how to pray for 72 other nations and religions, and then pray for ourselves. This is the basic of Yazidi praise. When we believe there are another 72 religions, and it's our obligation to first pray for them and then for ourselves. What I'm trying to say that how peaceful a community could be, even praying for others then for themselves, have always been introduced as the one who committed crimes, not the one the crimes had committed against them. I think Yazidis have been known now because of the genocide, because of the last genocide, thanks to the technology that most of you have heard about. There are many genocides that has happened, and this is the 74th, and none of you, and I'm sure none of the audience, have heard about Yazidis. And I hope this time, next time when we talk about Yazidis, I wouldn't, and the other Yazidi activists, the one we called ourselves activists, we forced to be activists. I never chose to be activist, and I never chose to be called an activist, and I can't define myself as an activist. I remember when I was 16-year-old in 2007, when a similar attack happened, in my family calling the Farman, which means genocide. And that developed how each and every Yazidi became an activist. Each and every Yazidi be an activist to try to let the world know what happened to Yazidis and who Yazidis are. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we look at the present, because many Yazidis were, of course, sent away from where they lived, or worse, where are most of them now living?
This is a question maybe have been asked in the last events have been organized by Dibali and other institutions. Unfortunately, I wouldn't tell you any updates on new things. I would just repeat the same names that other Yazidi activists have just told you. I'm going to repeat the names, I'm going to repeat the statistics, unfortunately, because nothing happened. Not many change has happened. The majority of Yazidis, after 7 years of genocide, still living in tents in Iraq without a future. Few of them consider themselves lucky to be in Europe. Very few of them consider themselves lucky found their loved ones in mass graves. But the majority still living in tents in Iraq. After 7 years, the Sinjar area still it's controlled by different political parties and different armed groups. The majority of Yazidis cannot go back to Iraq. And here again, we criticize both Iraqi and Kurdistan regional government as well as the international community for doing very little and too late. 7 years passed, the majority of them cannot go back to their homes.
What is the life like in the camps?
I think when Brenda just talking about Majdal, it was clear what the life is like in an IDP camps. And also some of our team in Frida Global Organization met with Majdal last week and many other survivors. And I wouldn't call them survivors, but still victims, with having very little access to education or not access to education at all. Same with psychosocial support and health programs. Most of them are still living in this hardship of tents. And it's more important to mention these ones who left both their parents, who became parents for other siblings. A friend of mine called Hala Safil, she's a survivor. After surviving rape and being sold, she now became father and also at the same time mother to her other younger sisters. Trying to find a job, trying to find anything to help her sisters in that IDP camp, in a tent.
Where does she live exactly?
She lives in an IDP camp in Iraq, and that's the case for all Yazidi, or most of the Yazidis.
And how old is she?
She is, I think she's 20. I'm not quite sure about, but she's around 20s. And this is just an example that so many young, and I wouldn't call them even, some of them are as young as 16 and 15, being father and mothers, the parents for their siblings.
How many children does she have to look after?
3. And this is just an example of many others. This is just an example that I know about, I'm sharing with you. There are many thousands others that none of us know about them, none of us talk about them. And the Yezidis in an IDP camps have no hope. All this activism, advocacy, have been take place in an international community, but the situation hasn't changed. And I sometimes get many critics from when I call my friends and colleagues in Iraq, and I say, why you speak out? Why survivors speak out? Because nothing has changed. As nothing has changed on ground, and still they are telling us that the way that survivors, I would say again, that there will be nothing called Yezidis on international agenda without the tears of survivors, mainly female survivors, like Frida, Khalaf, like Nadia Murad, Dalan, and many others. I have witnessed how they were crying after each interview. I've witnessed how hard for them to repeat the details how been raped and sold. In 21st century, ladies and gentlemen, we still until today facing people, children, sold in slavery market. This is nothing that I'm talking about have took place in 4,000 years ago. It's until today taking place and it's ongoing.
How do you feel if you think about that all these women have been sharing their stories, that it's costing them so much, and nothing really seems to change? What do you think about it? How does it make you feel?
To be honest, as a person, as a man, as a human being, each time when I was translating or maybe supporting them in a meeting or in a conference, I was always feeling shameful. But also on the other hand, I was feeling strong, proud, how these young women became leaders for the Yezidis, how they changed, I would say, the Middle East's known culture, that women became leaders.
And you say, sorry for interrupting, you say shameful. Why shameful?
Shameful because I'm a man, shameful because I'm a human being, that we're doing too little, and shameful because these crimes are still existing, and we just listen to them without trying to take any actions. This is not something that we cannot do it. Maybe I, as a person, can help with translation, can help with coordination, but there are politicians and world leaders who can change international laws. They can take decisions. And this is why it's important these women speak out. Without their advocacy, there are many other minorities like Yezidis will face similar genocide campaigns. It's important to not only talk about Yezidis. Unfortunately, the other religions like Christians, Kakai, and Sabia, and also some Muslims face similar crimes in Iraq. But Yezidis were the ones who suffered more. According to ISIS ideology, they are the people of no book, infidels, and they had only two choices, either to be killed or convert to Islam. While others, like Christians, I wouldn't call them lucky, but I would say maybe they have few of them have a better chance having three options. Same what happened thousands of years ago. Pay taxes, what are called jizya, or leave. But Yezidis are only had two choices, to be killed or convert.
Thank you. I'll come back to you in a bit. Thank you very much. Peshmerge, thank you also very much for being here.
Thank you.
You know a lot about the Yezidis who live in Syria at this moment. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about their situation?
Yes. First of all, thank you. Thank you for Zabali for having us here. It's an honor to commemorate Yezidis people. And as Saeed has already mentioned, the genocide has happened in 2007, 2014, but unfortunately it's still happening, but in a different way in Syria. Yezidis are indigenous people to places where they live. As we see on the maps there, Yezidis live in Afrin, in al-Qahtaniyah, in Qamishlo, al-Hazaka. They are indigenous people who have been living there like for 100 years. Mm-hmm. About their numbers, how many Yezidis are living there is very difficult and tricky question.
Yes.
And if I want to talk about that, I have to go a little back before the Syrian civil war. Yezidis in Syria were never considered as Yezidis, as a distinct religion. Yezidis were considered as Muslims. So as a Yezidi man in Syria, you were born, you were simply a Muslim. When a Yezidi couple wants to marry each other, they have to go to the Sharia court, al-Mahkam al-Shar'iyya in Syria, and an imam must approve their marriage. Besides that, they were never allowed to speak Kurdish as a language, which makes it more difficult to practice the religion. The most manuscripts are written in Kurdish, and most sayings are in Kurdish. So it was too dangerous for them. There wasn't a genocide, like ISIS riding in tanks and killing people or enslaving. It was
not like that.
It wasn't like that, but it was like more silent genocide, more silent, like trying to eradicate what is Yezidi. Luckily, that has changed in 2012 in northern Syria.
How? What happened?
In 2011, the Syrian Revolution or Syrian Civil War, which was turned out to be a civil war afterwards, or converted, actually. It's not our point of discussion now.
No.
At that time, in 2000, so a year later, Assad withdrew all his forces from northern Syria, what Kurdish people call Rojava, or northern Syria. Kurds take the lead. Under the lead of the PYD, a Kurdish party, Kurds started organizing themselves. And for the first time, and in the history of modern Syria, Yezidis were recognized as a religion. We had in 2012 the PYD, or the local Kurdish government, issued a decree, article number 3, under the social contract, where Yezidis were recognized as Yezidis. So institutions, religious institutions were opened. For example, Mala Izdian, Yekitiya Izdiya, like the Union of Yezidis. They were free to practice their religion, to call themselves Yezidis, and they had also seats in the local government, and especially in the Ministry of Religion Affairs, besides other minorities, religious minorities like Christians and Alavis in Syria. So about the exact numbers, it is unclear because they were considered as Muslims,
yes.
And even the Baas regime in 60s held a national census, and in that time, many of Yezidis lost their citizenship in Syria and were considered as ajanib, or like foreigners in their land. But there is estimation by the U.S. government prior to the 2011 estimation is like 60,000 Yezidis were living in northern Syria.
And what we were speaking, and you said it as well, and we also named this event like this, that is this the ongoingness of the genocide. And we named it that because, as you elaborated on already a little bit, it's not only, or it is not the killing only, but it's also the trying to erase the complete culture.
Yeah.
What is that like at this moment?
Unfortunately, it is endangered. It's gotten worse. Has gotten worse. In 2018 and 2019, Turkey has launched 2 operations into northern Syria under the pretext of fighting PKK.
In which villages? In the cities?
Like two regions in the northwest. It's Afrin, where it's like for 98% Kurdish, where the Yezidis have lived before 2018, and also in Sarikaniye, in Arabic, Sulaiman, in the northeast of Syria, in the middle. So in 2018, Turkey launched an operation supported by Islamic rebels, which are had support from the Dutch government. Dutch government has sent about 26 million euros to these anti-Assad rebels, which turned out to be like jihadists, like other rebels in Syria, committed serious crimes against humanity. So in 2018, the operation was launched by Turkey. They succeeded in controlling Afrin because they wanted to liberate the Kurds from ISIS, as ISIS was present in the area. It was a lie because the Yezidis in Afrin from 2012 until 2018 were protected by the YPG, which is also considered by Turkey as a PKK offshoot. So since the Turkey and Islamist rebels took control of Afrin, the first thing they have done, they destroyed the building of the Mala Izdian, the house of Yezidis,
yes,
which was like Yezidis could go there for their issues or like religious-related issues. So it was destroyed. Besides that, rebels groups like al-Jabha Shamiya, which is also well known in the Dutch media, which also received money from the Dutch government, started a campaign, went to Yezidi villages in Afrin, and sometimes it asked them to convert to Islam, because they are devil worshippers in their ideology. They were like expelled. Their culture, their shrines were demolished, and unfortunately, it's still happening in Afrin. It's still happening. Yezidis live in fear, cannot express their religion because they are simply like infidels, devil worshippers. So unfortunately, the Yezidis had only 6 years in Syria where they could live freely and proudly call themselves Yezidis. But since Turkey entered the battleground in Syria, it has been reverted, and not reverted like people still. I have talked to people and said like, I hope Assad come back. Can you imagine? You know, like he said to me, like Assad at least didn't come to me and said to me, convert to Islam. So people are like now willing that Assad comes back and take control to be freed from what's happening to them on a daily basis in Afrin and in al-Qahtaniyah and other regions. And gods know what is the next target for Turkey and Islamist rebel in northern Syria. And as a result of this operation in Afrin, estimation before the incursion in 2018, there were 33 Yezidi villages. Now estimation is that only 5,000 people are living in Afrin. Before the incursion was almost 30,000. A lot of them just fled, was afraid of what will happen to them, and unfortunately it happened. People are asked, convert to Islam. People, if you don't convert, you will be set out your house. And unfortunately, what happened in Shangal is genocide. The whole world heard about that because it was ISIS. But what's happening in Afrin and al-Qahtaniyah, well, they hear about that, but okay, because it's our NATO member, Turkey is there, we have to be careful.
There's a very different approach to
that, and that's what's really like dangerous, because we had promised the Yezidis like it will never happen.
No.
But it's still happening.
Yes, that also might be because, of course, the images that you saw of people on the mountain were very gripping, of course. Well, this sounds a lot more like something that is slowly done. It's hard to capture.
Indeed, and besides that, not only like it happens silently, but because Turkey uses a very good pretext. We call it in Dutch like opvang in eigen regio, like housing people in the region. What's happening now? Kurds, Yezidis are expelled from Afrin. Arab Sunni Muslims who fled Al-Ghouta, Zabadani, and other cities are housed there. And if you look to the statistics and where these settlements are built for the refugees, they are refugees. They fled from Assad to Afrin. But there is a pattern. Those villages or those settlements are being built in Yezidi villages. It is so dangerous. People don't see it because we are helping refugees. Great, but at what cost? You are helping group, but you are also eradicating the culture, the history.
You are helping a culture being erased, basically.
Indeed. So yeah.
I'm gonna leave this subject here. Thank you very much, because there's two more things that I would like to discuss with you while we're here. And the first is we already moved forward to the present, which is very good. Thank you for that. But I also wanted to go, especially since in the announcement of this program, we wanted to focus not only on the genocide in 2014, but also about what happened in 2007. So, Saeed, I wanted to ask you, can you, and I'm going to ask, it's not very nice, but briefly tell us what happened then? And also, if you want to react, of course, or if you want to add something to, you're very welcome.
First of all, what Peshmerge has talked about, it's very similar to what Yezidis has faced in Turkey. And the fear that we have, there will be same situation in Iraq. We have examples from Turkey that now very few of them, maybe very few hundreds of them live in Turkey, while there are millions of Yezidis living in Turkey. And same case happened in Syria now, and it's repeating itself again in Iraq. Before we start with what happened in 2007, it's important that we mention that the genocide was not only 2007 and also in 2018, 14 I mean. Many genocides from Iraqi Muslims, Iraqi government and Ottoman Empire took place. In 2007, in 14th of August, in a day like yesterday, al-Qaeda, a very similar group to ISIS, has planned 4 coordinated big trucks, estimated to be the biggest explosion have ever happened in Iraq since 2003. Targeted Yezidis in 2 Yezidi villages called Siba Sheikh Khidir and Til Ezer. And according to the statistics has been published by the local and also the US government, more than 700 of civilians were killed. Thousands of them were injured and many thousand houses were destroyed. That was an attack has been by some not official resources, official literature. It's maybe as a second worst or biggest attack after 9/11. That time, unfortunately, only a few people knows about. And this is one of the examples of another 73 genocide campaigns has happened. That day, when I just mentioned earlier, I didn't know what genocide means. As a 16 young Yezidi child, I would say. The only thing I understood was Firman, or my family calling this is another Firman. Why I'm saying that? Because we as children know what Firman is, although we don't know what genocide and Holocaust in different language means. But it's in Yezidi, I would say in Kurdish Kurmanji called Firman. That was the time that I knew what Firman is. But unfortunately, we've seen that we lived this another Firman. And when we saw the UN never again, we thought there will be no Firman anymore. But it has repeated itself, and I hope there will be no 74th genocide. And honestly, speaking honestly, I'm not sure if there wouldn't be 75 and 76 with this condemnation and with this support, the little support that Yezidis received and other minorities. I can be diplomatic and tell you some very diplomatic and nice things happened from international community. And first of all, I would like, as a Yezidi, thank the German government for bringing 1,000 Yezidi survivors and children, among them the leading this program, Professor Dr. Kizelhan. He and his team and German state of Baden-Württemberg showed to the world it's possible to save lives. It's possible to support the most vulnerable people, a most vulnerable group, which survivors of sexual violence and being raped and sold. I also would like to thank the Dutch government, the historical moment recognizing the genocide against Yezidis. And one of them behind this, I would say, historical decision, Ms. Anna Kuik, apologies if I mispronounce your name.
We will get to that more, but I want to address a little something that you said. I want to ask a bit more directly. Do you think there will be a 75th genocide? Do you believe this was really the last time? Do you think something has changed?
If we analyze the 7 years after the last genocide or the 74th genocide, I'm not optimistic that there wouldn't be a 75 and 76. Why I'm saying that? I mentioned these, I would say, great examples, and some countries and international community did. But also, the other side, it's shame on world leaders and international community haven't done very little. And also, we don't need to forget that thousands of people from these own countries. Among them is Netherlands. Among them, many European countries were part of these attacks. They were part of killing, enslaving children and women. They were part of this genocide. We don't need much. We're just asking if you can't bring the ones who committed crimes. That's the case now in most of the European Union countries. If you can't bring them to justice, at least bring survivors and children, like Germany did.
I think, in the next panel we will touch upon that as well. I have two final questions before we close, and we're going to listen to Peshmerge. And the first thing I wanted to ask you, how many people are still missing?
According to statistics from the Iraqi local government and international and local organizations, until today there are more than 2,500 Yazidi women and children still missing. It's also important that always when Yazidis ask the international community to support or find a way to bring this, to save them, it's always the argument that the funding will go to ISIS. We agree, and we can understand. But what is the case with the ones who survived and now in IDP camps? Where the funding will go to? Why, when you can't bring them from safety, that you have the argument that you can't bring them because of financial support go to ISIS? But when many Farida, many Nadia and Jalal, who have no voice, not only no access to psychosocial support, but also no voice, also no freedom of expression. Only a few thousands of them are left in IDP camps. And I think now it's important to mention that the Netherlands during the Holocaust was a home for many Jewish people, was a home for saving people who faced the Holocaust. I think one dream that I and also other Yezidis living in Netherlands, the ones who behind this advocacy and also worldwide, there will be a similar project to the German state of Baden-Württemberg, the special quota project.
Thank you. Question for you both, my final question. Do you think Yezidis will ever be able to go back to Sinjar and live there?
If the life and the support will be same, the answer is very clear, no.
No.
That's because 7 years passed, there has been no justice.
Who are there now that are making it impossible to go back?
There are different Iraqi, Kurdish, KRG, Kurdistan Regional Government, and also Iraqi Central Government, different groups, and also some non-Iraqis. After 7 years, all these political conflicts trying who will control the Iraq, not who will rebuild the houses, has taken place. And the international community, again, is not really pushing the Iraqi local government to find any solutions. And one thing it is also important to mention that, unfortunately, if we had people from Europe and Western countries, maybe it's not nice to say that this wouldn't be happening. The Kocho village was surrounded for 2 weeks in 2014, from 3rd of August until the 15th of August. We're in a time all the world knew about. There was international media reporting about. And we hoped there will be someone giving a hand of help, but no one helped them until most of the men were killed in a day like today, where they gathered them in a school building. One of them told me many times that the school that she was hoping to be a teacher, that was the place where her father and brother killed. That was the place where most of her family were taken into enslavement. Now, I would like to maybe mention and take the opportunity that after this historical, I would say more symbolic and political decision by the Dutch Parliament, which we are very proud of and very thankful, that needs to look at what needs to be done after this decision. Yezidis, mainly survivors, mainly women and children, need your support. If you can't bring 1,000 like German government instead of Bad-Württemberg did, maybe 50, 100, even one, because each life matters. Because some of them are still having that brainwashing from boys that maybe they will convert to jihadists. Many women and children committing suicide in these IDP camps. It's a time that we call on our friends of Yezidi cause, like Ms. Hannah Kuik and many others, to come up with advocacy, with decisions to bring more Yezidis to Netherlands. That will be a topic that we will be proud of hopefully next year when we come to Dubai. We don't talk about what needs to be done, but we will just come here and thank, and we wouldn't repeat the same statistics. That is a hope and a dream.
I hope that with you. Peshmerge, what do you think? If you can briefly tell me what you think about ever returning.
Mm-hmm. I disagree a bit about that point with Saeed about like bringing people here too, because people need to be helped. That's correct, but they must go to where they belong, in the sense of that's the historical lands of Yezidis. If we help Yezidis who fled Afrin and bring them here, all their houses will be taken by Sunni Arabs, for example, or other groups. What did we do? We helped the powers there, whoever it is, Turkey, Islamic rebels, Assad, to erase their history. In my humble opinion is pressure must be put on the regional powers there. You have Turkey. Turkey must retreat from Syria. You have in Shangal, for example, my knowledge about that area, which is very geopolitical, very, very sensitive to Iran, to the Kurdish government, to the Iraqi government, and also to Turkey, which is bombing actually fighters, Yezidi fighters who are helping Yezidis to protect Yezidis, bombing them. So we have to help indeed, but in my opinion, we have to put more effort in pressuring the powers there. Not only the governments, but also, for example, pressuring the Islamic institution there to put an end to the thought that Yezidis are devil worshippers. Yezidis are indigenous to the Middle East. And we have to put pressure to do an end on that, because if we didn't do that now, over 50 years, you will have a new Al-Qaeda or a new Jabhat al-Nusra or IS or whatever so, and it will like, look, in our religious texts, they are devil worshippers. So it's not only political, but also religious. So, and why I say like we have to put effort in that, because as a European citizen, we know how much power the EU has in pressuring various governments, religious institutions to put an end, and helping to build also the peace in the region, bringing all people. I'm not against. I mean, I'm myself a refugee, but emptying the region is not a solution. Because that is their land. And it mustn't be erased or inhabited by other groups.
Thank you. I think this is something that we could spend on many more programs. But thank you very much, both. We're gonna listen to you actually as a short intermezzo, and then we're gonna talk some more.
Yes. Before I start, thank you, Saeed, thank you, Yanta. I'm going to play the duduk, which is an traditional Armenian instrument, and I will be playing music either collected or composed by Gomitas Vardapet, which was himself a victim of a genocide. Gomitas Vardapet was arrested in 1915 by the Turkish authorities, Ottoman authorities, among 250 intellectuals, Armenian intellectuals, and after intervening from the US government, he was released, but after he was released, he lost his mind. He couldn't endure the pain, he couldn't endure what happened to his people. He was banned from Turkey, sent to France, and his life ended in a psychiatric hospital in France. So his music is to commemorating the victims of Yezidi, of the Armenian genocide, honoring Gomitas, honoring the victims of the genocide on Yezidi victims.
If I may, I just would like to comment on the last question that Peshmerge raised. I totally agree that the people need to be helped in their region where they belong to. Because this was also a goal of ISIS, that destroying the culture. But why I'm saying the survivors, the most vulnerable, needs to be hopefully transferred or given a chance to come to Netherlands and other European, because they need psychosocial support and they are more vulnerable. But of course, the entire community needs more, I would say, efforts to be able to go back to their homes. One last thing I would like to talk about is that my theory that the foreign fighters from the Netherlands and other countries will just came back to their normal life. I wouldn't say I'm happy, but I was proud to accompany my mother who testified against an ISIS member who unfortunately chained her 5-year-old daughter to a window until she died. But I'm saying I'm proud because when she testified, one of the breaks, she was crying. She told me, I don't want the ISIS member to see me crying again. I'm here to testify. I'm here to see justice. I will cry outside the courtroom, but in the courtroom, I'm happy to stand and testify until I see justice. There are many other mothers like her ready to testify. There are evidence collected by UNITAD and ICMP and many other international organizations. There are investigations, and there are evidence, and there are people ready to testify. It's only a political decision needs to be made, and I hope that Dutch people and other European who joined ISIS committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide crimes wouldn't come back home without any justice. Thank you.
Thank you. We will talk about that some more in the next panel. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. The first piece is called Grung in Armenian. Second piece called Der Fogarmea. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, but it is translated, Lord have mercy. I will play one more piece, which is called Havun Havun, which dates back to the 10th century. It's a very old Armenian piece. Havun Havun. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna invite our next two speakers to the stage. Jan Yilal Kasilikan, am I pronouncing it more or less? Please let me know how to do that better. And Anne Kuik to the stage. Jan Yilan Kizelhan, sorry, it's better, is a psychologist. He's currently Dean of the Institute of Psychotherapy and Psychotraumatology at the University of Duduk and Director of the Institute of Transcultural Health Sciences in Baden-Württemberg State University. Welcome, thank you very much. Thank you very much also for coming back because you spoke here a few years ago. Anne Kuik, a member of Dutch Parliament for het CDA, Christian Democratic Appeal, and she has filed a motion to declare that ISIS has committed genocide against the Yezidi population. That was, well, how do you say that in English? Accepted, I'm going to go for. Mr. Kizelan, I want to start with you. It was mentioned also in the conversation we had before, you have a center in Germany where you help people with trauma get better. Can I say that? Get better?
To cope with the trauma.
To cope. And how many are you treating and how many people are in need of the help you are supporting?
Okay. Maybe let me start with today's in a heart with the Afghanistan people, because it's very related to the Yezidis genocide they experienced in 2014. We are talking about Taliban. And Taliban, there's no ideology difference between al-Qaeda and another radical Islamic organizations. And I'm very concerned for the people of Taliban, but at the same time, it will be a new center of terrorism, which will also affect the Western country, Netherlands, and other European and Western countries. So we underestimated the cruelty of this ideology. And I'm working since 20 years about trauma, but also on the reason of violences. And did many interviews in 2016, my job as a researcher with IS fighters in Iraq.
Yes.
And I know what they want and what is behind the ideology. Yezidis is just one case of millions of people they are targeted. Came to your question, we started in 2014 when the IS started genocide against the Yezidis. And the state government of Baden-Württemberg, Mr. Kretschmann, our prime minister, decided to do something. This was the reason. He said it's an inhuman action and we have to do so. I was, since the time, with the state ministry and with the ministry who worked for them, and went to Iraq and, as Saeed mentioned, to talk about 1,400 people at that time.
1,400 people, yes.
Exactly the number of 1,403 I will never forget, because, you know, if you listen every day, 10, 12 stories, and you believe there's no worse more, but after listen again, it became more worse and worse stories that you cannot believe. So it takes them in 2015, exactly 1,100 to Germany. And since then, it's now 7 years, they are under treatment. Social workers will support them, interpreters, because they didn't speak German at that time. And so it's a successful project because we saved life and we give hope to the people. And I mentioned the women who were in IS captivity. They're served traumatized, have nightmares, sleeping disorders, anxieties, somatic disorders, different kinds of psychological disorders. In the age from 8 years girls who were 10 months in the hand of IS, raped by many old men, and came to Germany. Now she is fine, more or less. She's visiting schools, speaking perfect German, visiting the school, and she want to be a lawyer. Maybe, hopefully, in 2 or 3 years, she will start to be a student. This is one of the part which we did. But of course, this is not enough. We are talking about 1,100 people, give them a future for a better life. But this was also not easy to take 1,100 to organize everything, to go to, when I mentioned 2014, we worked 30 kilometers far from the IS, where the war was going on. So it was, even for Germans, diplomats, for us as a researcher and expert, it was highly risky and difficult. But our family agreed and said, if you can save a life, then do it. So it was not easy.
And how many people would you say are still in need of the help you are granting?
Since 2017, we are running an Institute of Psychotherapy and Psychotraumatology at the University of Duduk, which is located in northern Iraq and in Kurdistan. Since the time we trained psychologists to be psychotherapists. We didn't have at that time psychotherapists in Iraq and in the Middle East. So this is the first institution at the master advanced degree. You can be a clinical psychologist and at the same time you became a psychotherapist, which you can treat people, traumatize people. But we are talking about 350,000 Yezidis in refugee camps, about 21 refugee camps. Our students working there. It's a kind of internship since we did about 6,000 to 7,000 hours of psychotherapy. But this, of course, not enough. When we started in 2017, I'm talking about the province of Duduk with about 2 million people, and they had just 5 psychiatrists. You can imagine that it's not possible to do so. Our project is a long-term. We are not an NGO, we are an academic institute, and we try to have the staff, local staff, to train them. There are Yezidis, there are Christians, there are Muslims, they're speaking Kurdish, they know the background, the cultural background, so it's easier to treat. Yeah. But of course, this is not enough to do even in Iraq or in Syria.
And what is the difference, would you say, between the interns that help people and speak with people in the refugee camps and the treatment you are giving in Germany? What's different between them?
Security.
Security?
Stability. There are basics of the psychotherapy and treatment. If you don't have any security, how you can talk about your trauma, the past trauma. And in the Yezidi case, it's a little bit more difficult. So the scientific community didn't know so much about so-called transgeneration traumata. We don't have so much research and impact about collective trauma. In the case of Yezidis, we are talking about 3 types of traumas, which is one of the
giving on family to family to family.
Transfer from one generation to the next generation. Saeed and Peshmerge mentioned about the 74th genocide of the Yezidis. Somehow it must pass to the next generation and impact the cognition, the behavior, the emotions, the way to protect themselves, even the culture and the rituals is impact since 800 years at least. We know from our research, because I have a second PhD in Arabic science and Orientalism, and we did a lot of research in Ottoman archives in Istanbul and Ankara. We know at least in the last 630 years during the Ottoman empires, at least 1,200,000 Yezidis has been killed by Muslims. And about 1,800,000 Yezidis were converted by force to Islam. Saeed mentioned the case of Yezidi. Historically, the main center of the Yezidis was Turkey.
Yes.
It was not Iraq and not Syria.
It was Turkey.
And now we have just 576 Yezidis in Turkey. Only 576. So we already witnessed a genocide in Turkey. And came to your question to Saeed, we are now facing the same to Yezidis in Syria as well in Iraq. So the Yezidis are on the border to survive, or in the next 5 generations not be accessed anymore. This is the point.
This is what is happening.
Make it very clear. And if we not act now politically, socially, economically, in 5 generations we will not have any more Yezidis. And the Yezidis history is going back to 4,000 years.
Before we speak more about this, I want to ask you 2 more things about the practice that you do. Because I also think it's very important to state how horrible, of course, but also how intense it is what these people went to. You said to cope, but Is it possible for these women to live a life with sometimes happiness?
You know, we know from our work in neurologically and psychologically, we know you cannot forget it.
Never.
Somehow you can learn to deal with it.
How do you learn that?
Because if you experience trauma, your brain and your all emotional are focused just on this trauma event. Everything in the past you forget, you have no future, because every day you have nightmares, you memorize is about the experience. There are some different kinds of psychological disorder, like dissociations, like faintings.
Yes.
And so we can say, yes, this is a part of your life. You are not able to forget it. But through psychological technique, we can teach you to control the symptoms, not to forget the symptoms. And this is the difference between our approach, we mentioned as a transcultural psychiatry, because we have to include the cultural sources, the impact of the culture, the belief of the Yezidis, to understand and to cope this. In the Western countries, or Western way of treatment, we are focused on individual trauma and just to reduce the trauma. And our experience, we are able technically to reduce the symptoms, but after the 6 months or 1 year, they will have different kind of psychological disorders.
Yes.
So the past will be a part of you present, and you can learn it through different kind of techniques and have a future, at least. And this is a problem in Iraq and in Syria or in Sinjar. People, to cope with trauma, you need at least imagine an idea of tomorrow.
Yes.
You should know maybe tomorrow will be good, or the next day after tomorrow will be good. If you don't have a future or idea of a perspective what will happen tomorrow, so you will remain in trauma. And remain in trauma in the case of Yezidi and genocide means every day goes through the hell, because they memorize every day these events.
This is my last question, it's 2 in 1 really. Why did you start doing this work, and how do you cope with hearing these stories every day, day after day? Because we are only sitting here, you know, I'm only sitting here for 2 hours, and I'm already thinking, how do you do that?
Yes, I'm doing this since 22 years. It's not the first time. I did it with in former Yugoslavia. From Afghanistan, we have a lot of refugees or African countries that came, and this is my job. No. At least as a professional, I try to have a distance from the cases that I heard. And maybe you'll be astounded or surprised every time it's not my case. You know, you cannot imagine how it would be to torture. I have no idea how it is. I can imagine maybe. I don't know how it is as a woman to be raped. No. Or as a nine-year-old girl who told me the stories. But in the same times, I was so impressed, still I'm so impressed by the power of those women who stand up and they are fighting. And Nadia Murad was one of our patients who came through our project to Germany, and now she is talking. You know, the Yezidis, like all in the Middle East, a patriarchal society. It's a man's society. But now the speaker of the Yezidis are women, not anymore the men, which is, I like it, it's great. They have so much power. So my lesson from the history is, then I will finish. Historically, the human have the potential of cruelty and at the same time the power of love. So it's a kind of decision. If you go back to the history of mankind, according to my research, at least 500 million people has been killed by human. Humans are able to kill human. The indigenous people in America, North and South America, about 50 million killed by Europeans. During the Mongolian time, 40 million people has been killed. During the Second World War, 60 million has been killed. Humans are able to kill humans. This is reality. We have to accept this. Yes. If we don't this, so we cannot find a new way how to work peacefully with people. This gives me some hope. If you go through the history of the mankind, We are very slowly, but we are going to be changed. We are civilized. The civilization is not very secure. It's not very stable. But we have an idea how human could trade human. And this gives me hope, and the hope of those patients who are so much strong. And this is how we can work and have an idea of future. Hopefully it will be better.
Thank you very much. Anne Kuik, you filed the motion that was also mentioned here before at the table a few times. It was a motion for the Dutch government to officially recognize the genocide on the Yezidi as a genocide. Why did you do that?
Yeah, it was a motion that the whole parliament supported to recognize the genocide. While I was preparing my debate, we had a debate about a woman, a woman who came back to the Netherlands. And while I was preparing, I noticed that the attention was on the perpetrators. And so I got in contact with Brenda. I saw her tweets. I already knew Parliament was already has given an assignment to the government to press the UN Security Council to recognize the genocide. But I didn't know that Parliament didn't already said it itself and recognized the genocide. So behind the scenes, I asked all the other parties, because you don't want to put in a motion
that gets rejected, of course.
Rejected. This is very painful.
For everyone,
really on this subject. So. Everybody supported it, and I think it's an important signal. Also, an important signal not to focus only on the perpetrators. Yes, it's very important, and to get justice and prosecute them. That's a priority. But we also should tell the stories of the survivors. And I noticed in the Netherlands that there is a lot of attention for why were those women going to IS. And I think it's weird. We have to hear the stories of survivors also at the talk shows.
I absolutely agree with you. I think it is also a very, very good thing. And it was mentioned at the table as well that this was finally recognized by the Dutch government. So I think that's really a great effort, and very well that you stood up for that.
It's just a small thing. There has to be
a lot more. And I was hoping that for the last 15 minutes that we have, we could move towards that as well, because I think it is the way that in the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide by the UN, it is written that once a genocide gets recognized as a genocide, it is the people who do that and the countries who do that, they also make themselves, how do you say that? They say that they will try their utmost best and they will carry the consequences of that, which also mean they will prosecute the ones that were responsible for this. But this, I think, lies a little bit difficult in the Netherlands at this moment, because at this point, a lot of, and I want to say as well, there's 305 people that we know of from the Dutch nationality that went there and committed those crimes. And at this point, I think, well, a lot of them have died, but not all of them. But at this moment, they're not being prosecuted.
No, because, we want an international tribunal. When we had the Second World War, we also had
we had it in Rwanda.
Yes. So
UN had it in Rwanda.
I think everybody wants to prosecute them there. They went to Iraq and Syria, it's difficult. We have allies, and we have we work together, but there isn't a tribunal yet. And here in the Netherlands, our prosecutors already have names, and they are brought to court, and the lawyers of the perpetrators or the suspects say, the suspects want to be here in the Netherlands.
Of course, because
Yes, and that's
I can understand their
that's
wish.
a difficulty, because we want them to get prosecuted and get justice done. But we also see the height of the punishment. It's not that high in the Netherlands.
In the Netherlands,
and that
compared
feels
to
also
maybe
very it feels injustice.
Yeah.
Of course, please.
By law, it's a problem because the Iraqi didn't sign the Roma Statute, which means you cannot take any perpetrators from Iraq to Den Haag, for example, for the international court. It's actually a problem which needs to do more pressure on Iraq. In Iraq, they executed by law, many of the IS fighters, which we were very surprised. Because it is more important to know who were behind the IS, who were behind the perpetrators, who supported them, and just have a symbolic court and then executed them. So there's some information they want to hide, international they want to hide. So in my opinion, we need to do more pressure to have an international court in Den Haag, but at the same time to pressure to have national courts for IS, special national courts like in Mosul and Baghdad and Duduk, with international lawyers with experience to do like in Africa or other countries. This maybe kind of mixture will be very helpful. Yeah.
Can I add some point? Not only in Iraq, but also in Syria, al-Hol camp, which is populated.
Yeah, absolutely.
The estimation, like 70,000 people are living there. They are brought there after IS was destroyed, theoretically, or like on the ground. And Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi killed a couple of months later. But what actually it's not against you, but like the Western countries, like they must be tried there because they have committed crimes there. I understand it, but at the same time, the feet on the ground, soldiers who fought against ISIS, the Kurds, the YPG, SDF, Kurdish-led SDF, were left alone against Turkey when Turkey entered Syria and had invaded many regions in Syria, and we all know what the main reason behind this intervention was. So what I always like, okay, great, we are recognizing the genocide, but what do we do actually to help other Yezidis in Afrin, for example, in al-Qahtaniyah? They are facing, as we are talking now, facing genocide in different form, not by killing, but by forcing people to convert to Islam. I wonder what, for example, my question on you, what is the Dutch government doing on this? And especially because the NLA program, which was started in 2015 and lasted until April 2018.
What is this program?
It was a help program. The Dutch government sent money, amount of 6 million euros.
You mentioned in the previous
to rebels, to anti-Assad rebels.
And thank you. I think the question is clear.
Yeah. Yeah, you totally have a point, and it's very hard, and I think you have to do a lot of different things. I think it's important to help rebuild houses in Sinjar. I think it's important to have enough psychological help, and but also education and work, because you have to give people perspective. It's not just one thing. When you have a certain amount of money and amount of time, the thing is on who are you going to spend it. And in my opinion, you should focus on the survivors and the victims, and not on the people who went to the area to do harm. Well, that's a balance, and I think we have to. I think the international community failed. We failed, and we didn't stop the genocide, but we have to put enough effort in it to prevent any harm further. And I think it's hard. I think it's hard. I don't have a solution to make it.
And of course, I know you're one member of a parliament, and there's 150 people. But there's two things that I think we should discuss now. And the first is, of course, the recognition was, I think, very important. And Jan, I wanted to ask you as well. What does that mean to victims? What does recognizing the crime as a genocide? What does that mean? But at the same time, how do we make sure this is not just a symbolic action? And you mentioned we are at a very good timing, actually, because there's no new parliament formed yet. There's 4 years coming up. When Brenda's book came out, Dilan Yezidis was here of the VVD, and I asked her as well, is this place, like Germany, is that not really something that Jan is leading? Is that really not something we can do, taking into consideration that it was our Dutch citizens who...
Yeah, I think there are numerous of things we should look at. Also the psychological help, and you need interpreters, and you need to know about the culture. And what I said, if you have a certain amount of money and time, on who do you want to spend it? And I rather spend it, I have the priority to spend it on the people who survived than, well, the families who also hurt them, but of the perpetrators left here in Holland. So I think I think that's one of the things we should look at. But we also made a point in the last debate that we also need diplomatic actions with the Iraqi government to. Well, people live in tents still. And they need homes. They need a perspective. They need education. I also learned that little boys didn't go to school because they lost a lot of time when they were captive. So it's a bigger story, and we have help programs, and it's not enough. No. It's not enough. Yeah, I know.
Actually, to be concrete, when we started our project in Germany, so after us, Canadian take about 1,400. We talk with them and advise them how to do that. And, you know, we are neighbors, so very close to each other. So we have an idea. We did a lot of evaluation and research how to do it. We now wrote a book how to do this, to bring them what is needed, and psychosocial support, translators, and so we are ready to support you. So yeah, I can talk in the name of our government to say if any time the Dutch government want to do something like to take Yezidis to here, we are ready to support you anytime. We have an institution in Iraq. We know how to find the people, and I was 4 weeks ago in Iraq, in Duduk, and one of the 19 years girls was 14 when she was in the hands of IS, was freed now. And you will not believe how she was traumatized to be 6-7 years in the hands of the IS. So it's totally different. So this is what I'm doing in 2014 when we did the research and bring the traumatized women and girls to Germany. And now, after 7 years, it's a total different situation, psychological difference of this woman. So they need really urgent help. Yeah. We are not able to support them in Iraq. We don't have the capacity. And, you know, in Duduk, there's just one hospital and take 20 or 30 persons. And that's that's it. This is maybe one project in my idea. The same, Saeed mentioned, there is a contract between Erbil and Baghdad about how the Yezidi could go back to Sinjar areas with the support of the UN, which the idea is good, but many of the points are not in the interest of the Yezidis. And this can be diplomatically. If the Dutch government is visiting or to speaking with Iraqi and Kurdish government, it will be really helpful. I can just say from my experiences, I accompanied many ministers from Germany, from the United Nations, and was in Baghdad and in Erbil. The first agenda are Yezidis always. And all politicians and ministers say, yeah, we are interested in Yezidis, we started to help. And believe me, after the delegation is not anymore there, nobody's interested in that. No. And this is the problem. So we have to take more pressure on Erbil and Baghdad, and this will be helpful. And European countries have a full respect, and I'm sure that will be move something. Yeah,
and I think it's very important to tell the stories again and again, because what you also said, there's a lot of fake news. That the Yezidis are devil worshippers. It's fake news, and we live with fake news all the day. But it's very important to make sure people know the real story.
Saeed, I'm going to give the word to you, and I have 2 more questions, but then we have to.
I would like to comment on the justice perspective, as Professor Khidir and Kuik also mentioned. One thing is also important to shed the light on, that these ones who, I would say, the European Union countries and Western countries would more in favor of prosecuting them in Iraq. With this Iraqi existing law, that wouldn't work, because the genocide, it's not a part of Iraqi law. So all of them will be prosecuted based on the Iraqi criminal law, Article 4, that is specifically terrorism law, which none of the survivors will be hurt, and Yezidis will not be hurt in open public courtrooms. So this is also a fear that many leaders and many members of ISIS will be persecuted without survivors' voice, without the genocide as a law in Iraq. And as he also mentioned, that if you have many, I would say, problems, and as we start from rebuilding Sinjar, security and safety, but there is also the case of death and life. The case that Professor Khidir also mentioned, that these women and children are the ones more vulnerable and needs help. So when you have, I would say this is a message to the Dutch government and parliament, when you have people, experts, who made this show to the world is possible. And Professor Khidir already mentioned that German and his team are ready to help. When you have survivors ready to testify, while we may be debating now in this nice place, there are many women and children sitting in a small tent, hoping that there will be a friend like you, a friend to the cause that is genocide and still ongoing. And I hope this message will be delivered.
Thank you all. I am going to open up to the audience, also because I don't want to take everyone's time for too long. I'm already running out of time a little bit. But before I do that, I want to ask Your Excellency Tigran Balayan, and he's the ambassador of the Republic of Armenia to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And we invited him here to be present at the program, and we're really very grateful that you came to say a few words.
When I got the invitation, I was preparing to completely another speech, another remarks, to tell you about our prevention agenda as a representative of a country who not only hosting the biggest Yezidi temple in the world, but also the ambassador of a country whose several dozens of citizens of Yazidi origin are full-fledged members of our society, and I'm representing also them here today in the Netherlands as well. But yesterday I had a phone call with one of 107 MPs in Armenian parliament, Mr. Rustam Bakoyan, who is representing the Yezidi community. And what he told me, I mean, I was saying, listen, I want to do this and this, to speak about this. He said, no, please don't do that. Just tell about the dire, desperate situation now. The genocide is continuing, and I'm very grateful to the speakers here that described so well what is going on there. And pleading you, as an ambassador of Armenia, not to give up on that people. They are in dire need of assistance now. They don't have medical access. They living under worn-out tents. They have no education. If we speak here, we go to our homes, we go to our offices without doing anything, we contribute to the continuation of the genocide. And I'm passing the message of an Armenian MP, which is member of the governing party or in the governing faction, to do utmost today, tomorrow, each day to help that people, that people that are catch up in a tense without any hope for the future. We should do it now. Thank you.
If I can have some light, then I can see the people in the audience. That would be very nice. Is there anybody who wants to comment or say something? Then I'm coming towards you with a microphone.
VVD-Kamerlid.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe to add a few things that were said, I agree with my colleague on the guide that it's very important that we keep paying attention to what happened, but also what's currently happening. So one of the initiatives that we are now taking in Parliament to have a meeting like this, but in Parliament, so to have the round table and hear all the experience and make sure that attention is paid, and that based on that round table, we can also put pressure on the government to do something now that a genocide has been recognized. I think that the difficulty and the dilemma is that there are many ideal solutions, but we have to work together with local partners and with the Iraqi government. And the legal system in Iraq, as already has been said, is not perfect. So I think there is a dilemma of either using the current institutions, current legislation, but then you do not have a perfect trial and maybe also not outcomes that we like, because there is, for example, a death penalty in Iraq, and we in the Netherlands, we are not in favor of that. But on the other hand, if we try to change institutions, legislation and everything first, then it can take a lot of time before there will be any justice. But there is a dilemma there, but I think we have to find a balance in the dilemma. That means that we have to have a lot of discussions like this, and also with experts, to see what are the solutions that are feasible locally, but it also are to at least a minimum level in accordance with our thinking of what a legal process means. But it's not easy. There are no easy answers, but we need to keep working on it. We need to keep paying attention to it, and then hopefully that brings some hope to all the victims that are still suffering today.
I thank you very much. I very much agree with you.
Can I ask a question back?
Yes, of course, but first I want to say one thing, because I think we have quite a remarkable situation here, as you as a parliamentary from the VVD, and Anneke, you as a parliamentary from the CDA, and Jan Kieselhan, who has been helping these women for years now. I think it would be actually a really good idea if you would invite him to one of these circles and now finally discuss, if I can put it on the table here, whether it would be possible to help more women with their trauma here in the Netherlands. Can I ask that of you after 2 hours of these very
I can also invite you to duduk, so to the university, so you're every time welcome, and I will accompany you and show the refugee camps. You know, one of the Green member, Annalena Baerbock, who is now candidate for the German chancellor, she was with me 1 week in the refugee camps. And she was so much impressed, and now we are starting to, hopefully we will have a second quarter special group and take maybe again 400 or 500 people to Germany. So sometimes to see your own self, it's more impressive just when I talk you how brutal this is. It is.
Maybe just a quick reaction, because this is indeed very difficult. I've been myself to refugee camps in Lebanon, I've been to Jordan, and indeed people living in such tents for years and years, that is, of course, that is a horrible situation. On the other hand, I agree with what one of the speakers, Mr. Morad, said, is that we cannot bring thousands or even tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people over here. So you have to be very careful if you can only bring a very small proportion of that. Who are the ones who are in most need? Who are the ones who have these psychological traumas and that are not able to stay there much longer? And then I think that is also a role that, for example, the UN can play, because there are resettlement programs like this, and they try to focus on the most vulnerable people. But indeed, we have to look, because you also mentioned what happened today in Afghanistan. There's, of course, a big risk that many people will come here, and our shelter camps in the Netherlands are already at full capacity at the moment. So we need to be very careful and selective at who we can bring here. But then we need to know indeed who the most vulnerable people are, because they are the ones that we should focus on then.
Just reaction, please.
Yes, we're just talking about the most vulnerable human. Especially it was in our cases women who were raped, and it was not clear if they will be accepted by their own society. And still now, from the 1,100, we have no one cases of committed suicide. In January this year, 11 women committed suicide in the refugee camps. So I'm talking just about the most vulnerable people. My idea, this is the reason why I'm working also in Iraq, to have more personnel, to staff, to experts. They have to help their own people in this region. So my idea is not to take all refugees, but the most vulnerable. Maybe this is a duty to be humans in Europe, that we are in a lucky position. Since 70 years we don't have a war. But as you mentioned, in Afghanistan, I'm really very concerned about the situation. Yeah.
I saw 3 questions. I'm going to take them all at once and then return to the table.
Thank you. My name is Hope Rickelman. I am the director of Yezidi Legal Network. Dr. Kieselhan, I'm happy that you're here. The rest also very pleased to see you guys. When we talk about psychological support, there's actually quite a lot being done right now. We have a project proposal together in cooperation with ARC and Centrum 45 and EMDR Netherlands, and we also had discussions with Dr. Kieselhan. But this is actually just lying there waiting for financial support. So when we talk about psychological support here in the Netherlands, maybe this is a call to action and reaching out to the Dutch government in support these initiatives, support these networks. Also on prosecutions, we have MOUs with UNITAD, with Yazda, and with CIJA, and other organizations that are working on the ground, and a good connection with the German community and also the Yezidi community here in the Netherlands. So keep talking to them. We also have conversations with the Dutch Public Prosecutor's Office and the TIM coming up. But you know, when we're here talking about what's happening or what has happened, let's also talk about the needs and how we can support those needs together with cooperation with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take that first thing you said. So there is a plan to the table later on. Another question over here.
I wanted to say something about the recognition of the genocide, which is good, and now talking about what needs to be done next. But it's been 7 years. It's been 7 years, and the parliament in Holland hasn't done much, or maybe nothing at all. And we haven't brought any people from there to here. And now the VVD member of parliament is taking the stage and trying to make it look as if he genuinely cares, but his party is the one that has incited anti-refugee sentiments in the Netherlands, which contributes to the fact that no people from Iraq can come to the Netherlands. So I want to make that point. It angers me very much.
I'm going to go and ask for a reaction, and then there was one more question somewhere. Yeah, I'll go to the front. Please.
No, a couple of things I would like to say in response. I think it's not true that nothing has been done. It is indeed true that now genocide has been recognized by Parliament, but one of the reasons why it was recognized now because UNITAD had done a research and has said officially that it is a genocide. Of course, we already saw the horrible images and everyone could see that those activities had been taken place. But what you don't want is that a genocide declaration becomes politicized. So it was important that the UN said, we have done all the research, we have looked at all the international laws, and we declared the genocide. And that was the moment, and we asked for that to the government many times, also as VVD. And now that this report had been written, it was also a good moment to say it's not a political discussion anymore. As Anna said, as a parliament, we can broadly say that there has been that it has been a genocide. Then second, regarding the refugees, it's not that my party is anti-refugee or anti-people who are suffering. We have a different view on what the solutions are. And some parties say, let's bring a lot of people over here. But my party is quite realistic on that. It's always a small amount that you can bring here. And as one of the other speakers said as well, then you focus on maybe hundreds or thousands of people that you can bring here, but there are hundreds of thousands of victims. So we think it's more effective to focus the aid and the help that we give on improving the situation in the region and helping make sure that that local justice takes place. And we think that's more effective, but we are not anti-refugee. And if I anger you, then I'm sorry, that was not my intention.
I think we should keep the rest of this conversation also because the technicians really asked me to stop at 5, but I'm going to go to Peshmerge for a quick reaction.
Yes.
And very briefly, please.
Hi, I'm the one who wrote the book, and since years I've been pleading for something like this, that the government would take in at least a few women and children. And I had a lot of conversations with politicians, with basically everyone. And all the time they told me, we're going to look at it. And in the end they said, no, we're not going to do anything because we believe that we should help the people over there. So what they did, they gave some organizations money, and that's it, basically. But now that you have recognized the genocide, I think it brings a certain obligation that you should at least consider taking in a few victims, because 305 people from the Netherlands, they joined ISIS. They made this genocide possible by joining ISIS. So I think it's an obligation from the Dutch government to at least take in a few of the victims. And that's also a question, of course. Do you agree with me that it brings an obligation if you recognize it?
I'm going to go back to the table and discuss these two briefly.
May I? Yes, thank you. Well, very nice. You have listened very well to me, but I don't want to be framed as like I don't want to bring people here. I said that in the context of the regional powers, including NATO member Turkey, for example, must be pressured to take serious steps to retreat back, to stop bombing the Kurds, Yezidis, in Iraq and in Syria. The genocide is recognized, but what is the Dutch government doing on the ongoing genocide in Afrin, in al-Qahtaniyah? Turkey is facilitating what's happening there. I wonder, so we recognized this genocide, and what Brenda has said, it brings also obligations. And one of these obligations, looking seriously into the ongoing atrocities against the Yezidis in Syria. They are not only living in Iraq or in Shangal, they are also living in Syria. And it's not personally at you, but the Dutch government recognition, good, we are thankful, but the ongoing recognition of the genocide must be also taken very seriously by the Dutch government.
I'm going.
Yeah, well,
Yes,
I think that's a fair point. It shouldn't be a symbolic thing, and I agree there are obligations to it. And what I said before, if I look at my time and amount of money, where's my priority? And I think this should be a theme also in the hearings, the round tables. I think that's with the Commission of Foreign Affairs, I guess. Yeah, okay, together with justice. And I think it's a theme, and it's good to let all the politicians debate about this particular theme and point.
Just one last remark.
Please.
After the genocide is the starting of a new genocide if you don't support them.
Yes.
And in the case of Yezidis, Yezidis are not a powerful people. They are a small group. They are not able to cope the trauma and the genocide alone. And maybe this is a duty of the human being to protect the Yezidis. Since 4,000 years, they have never any protection. And if you wanted to protect them in Kurdistan, Iraq, and to bring them here, maybe this will be to stop at least the genocide of the Yezidis. If not, they will have the same dignity and destiny like in Turkey. They will be finished from the planet.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for being here, for speaking today. Also to our two members of parliament, thank you very much. I think that you heard also that there's a lot of opening there, a lot of people to invite to these round tables. And that's not a very neutral thing to say, but I really, really hope you do. Thank you for traveling, you three of you, all the way from Germany. I am really, really grateful that you came here to share your experiences, to share your stories, because I know that is not very easy. Thank you for coming, and hopefully we will see each other next year, and maybe we have something
definitely
different to tell you then. I hope so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.